Plant-based milk owns 18% of the market in the US. It owned 0.5% just 5 years ago. Thank you all for being here. It's a real honor to be here. Indra's been talking about this conference for many years, and I'm like verklempt in front of all of you all. It's just, you know what I'm talking about, right? We're with our peoples, and it feels so good. So thank you for introducing me, Indra. And this is Charlotte, the mama, and Valentina, the baby. And Charlotte came to the sanctuary pregnant with Valentina. So Valentina's never seen an awful day in her life, unless she doesn't like the snow or something. But and Valentina was born on Valentine's Day, and Mama died a year ago. But Valentina's now the size of Mama. So I especially hate dairy, so that's why I do what I do. So I wanted them behind me to remind me and all of you of that. So when I originally talked to Heiko about coming to this conference, as came here from Southern California to hang with you guys, I thought, you know what? I want to talk to them about marketing. Yeah, that's going to really resonate. I seriously thought that it would be a good idea to stand in front of all of you, incredibly passionate people, empathetic people who are literally fighting for lives every single moment of every day, and talk about the value of impact-driven marketing. It sounded like a good idea at the time. But then something happened on an afternoon in July. I went to the Animal Rights Conference in Los Angeles. And almost the second I walked in, I felt this palpable sense of incredible heaviness, of hopelessness. It actually seemed like people were dragging weight and hopelessness with them from session to session. And as I drove back home on the 405 freeway south, I considered the contrast to what a meat and dairy conference might look like. That's right. How are our competitors motivating their sales force? How are they motivating their stakeholders? I bet they bring in top-shelf motivational speakers, and I bet they celebrate their wins. Have any of you all ever been to a sales conference like in your other life? Yeah, a few of you. They are a party, every single one of them, and you leave feeling so much more motivated and capable than ever to keep fighting. I imagine meat and dairy conferences are designed to fire up those packed rooms with the goal of leaving people believing in their ability and their success. And I thought, why aren't we as a movement taking a page out of our competitors' playbook? As an Olympic athlete, I became pretty much a master at uncovering what my competitors were up to, how they were unlocking kind of that last 100th of a second. So why are our competitors investing so much into firing up the leaders of their industries? Well, I'll tell you why. And you might not believe me, but you should. It's because they are scared. They do feel our heat. We have taken a bite out of their profits. Now, you all know the quote that is attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, saying, first they laugh at us, then they ignore us, then they fight us, and then we win. But it was actually Nicholas Klein, a trade union activist, who is the author of this quote, when in 1918 he gave a speech and said, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, and then they attack you and want to burn you, and then they build monuments to you. The meat and dairy people are long past laughing, if you haven't noticed. They're also no longer ignoring us. They are fighting back, and they are trying to burn us. And this is good, because that means that we are one step away from them building monuments to you. I'm not delusional. I am sometimes, but I'm not tonight. I understand we are still the smaller army, the very clear minority, and I understand how exhausting it is to be the underdog and to just keep fighting. I've essentially felt that way my whole life. I seem to fight against Goliath over and over. And when we feel defeat, our nature, it tells us to be rational, right? Give up and move on. It's kind of our MO. But for me, and I definitely suspect for you, I can't. I just can't not fight. Have we won? No. But are we starting to win? Absolutely. And if we focus on our successes, that's what's going to keep us in the game. At a meat and dairy conference, they celebrate their wins, not loll around in their losses. They take action because they know that we are hot on their heels. And guess what? We have had some big wins. We've had thousands of wins. Here's just 5 in a few different categories. Tyson Chicken is closing 4 plants in 3 states in the United States in 2024. Done, closed, out of business. Yeah, I know, all these, every single one of them. Plant-based milk owns 18% of the market in the US. It owned 0.5% just 5 years ago. In 1995, which is a little while ago, we had 10 companies on our movement's cruelty-free cosmetics list. You could count them on 2 hands. Now we have more than 6,000 companies making cruelty-free products. It's like, and one I'm especially excited and proud of, Got Milk, ceases to exist in the United States. You can find the website, but that's it. They know y'all are no longer buying it. And when the Game Changers first debuted, it became the most watched documentary on Apple TV in history. Not the most watched vegan documentary, but documentary ever. And yes, it's kind of crazy. I mean, all those people watched these crazy athletes on plants and thought it wasn't possible, but then the searches on Google went up over 10,000 times for plant-based and vegan. That's good. I know. It feels good to celebrate. That is what I said do, yes. We'll be dancing at the end of this, I promise. But just by the mere fact that you're here, something really deep inside you says that you believe we can actually take animals off our plates across the globe. And I have probably spent more time inspecting what keeps me fighting than most. And I want to share some of these moments with you. And my hope is that it will help you to laugh at the doubters, to celebrate your wins, and to stay in the fight no matter what you're facing right this minute. But before I even dive into the 3 most important mindsets that we must adopt to win this fight, I want to say I think it's going to take all of us to win. And there is no hierarchy of effectiveness. This movement needs street activism. It needs people to change laws. We need people to change food system. We need behavior change, technology and psychology. We need the sanctuaries. We need the undercover work. We need the vegan media. And I'm sure I've missed something important, but we need all of us bringing our very best selves forward. So stop fighting about who's doing a better job. It is every single one of us using our own very unique skill sets to win this war, and I don't want you to forget that. It's true. I'm going to take you guys back just a few years to 2001. Some of you weren't even here on this planet. It's good to see so many young people here, though, right? My cycling career was just starting to take off, and I was starting to get noticed. In just 3 years of cycling, I had placed 4th at U.S. national championships in the road race, and that started getting me noticed by the national team. And I got invited to this training camp at the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, California. So I arrived to this camp, and I have this kind of like go rogue or go home attitude. Like I'm just there. I had nothing to lose. I mean, it was either going to be a yes or a no right at the end of camp. And I was just like, I'm going to give this everything I have. So our very first morning, we wake up and we're called to the lab for physical testing. And it's here that they strap a mask to my face that measures my oxygen consumption, known as VO2 max. I have to even leave my fingers dangling from the bottom of my handlebars that I have like a death grip on because I'm so nervous, because they're going to prick all of my fingers every 60 seconds to check my blood to know what my lactate threshold is. And I'm on a stationary bike that some of y'all in Europe called a watt bike, know that. And it looks a little more like a torture chamber. It has big weights that are connected to a rope on a pulley system, and I have to pedal as hard as I can and hold those weights in suspension for as long as I can until they come crashing to the ground. It's super easy to do. So I'm all geared up, right? There's tubes and there's a mask on, tubes are running in and out of my body, and it's go time, and the sports scientists all enter the room. I take off, and I am pushing at top speed, as you can imagine, despite the bulky mask. Even the constant prick of the tiny needles doesn't even prevent me from taking hold, and I'm powering through with everything I've got, and I keep going, making sure that when this suffering ends, I can honestly say I had nothing left to give. And so that adrenaline and sheer lack of oxygen made my heart race faster than my legs can even pedal. The weights come crashing to the ground, and every single muscle starts to scream, stop. And then the test ends. The men say stop. This is 2001. Oh, the men. There were 3 men, each juggling coffee and a clipboard, deciding women's fate with their 30-minute assessments. One of the men reminded me of Kermit the Frog. Not to put down Kermit at all, but they had an eerily similar voice. With his uncapped silver pen, he motions for the other men to look at the printout from the test that he is holding that's mine. His big Kermit eyes, they kind of just kept darting around the room. It was like he couldn't see me or I was already forgotten. He was looking at the other women who some of are already world champions. He taps his pen on the clipboard and he says, "Nice effort, Dotsie." And with that, he shows me the reading from his magic test. And I see potential rankings on a graph, and they kind of look like this. It's amateur at the bottom, professional, national caliber, world class, and Olympic potential at the top. And in the middle is a tiny black circle that represents the diagnosis of my natural talent and ability. He reinforces where my little dot is by tapping it with his pen. Average. That's what I had achieved. A status of mediocrity. According to this graph, I was slightly better than average, but showed no hope for world-class competition, and certainly not the Olympic Games. I tried to look into Kermit's eyes because I wanted to thank him for his time, but he just kept darting them around. So I just say, got it, and I walk out of the lab. As I drive home, I wonder if there was some sense of power or pleasure in telling young women that their Olympic dreams stop here. I kind of chuckle to myself and I smile because honestly, I had never even dreamed of the Olympics. I've just fallen in love with the sport, with the discovery of what my body can achieve. And I physically shake my head as I drive. Less than 5 years prior, I was a 98-pound suicidal anorexic with a ferocious cocaine addiction. This body was once so sick that it saw no way out but death, and I couldn't figure out any other way to make the suffering stop. Before recovery, every hour I was awake, I was suffering. And now this same body is strong enough to race against lifelong athletes? Cycling is a painful sport. But with every sprint, every climb, every injury, every max effort, I know at some point the suffering will end. And at the time, I didn't realize, but this power over suffering was pivotal for me. Ultimately, I have a choice in when, for how long, and to what degree I'm going to suffer. Before long, I would realize that animals who are bred for human taste buds do not have that choice. So Kermit, I think to myself, it's all good. I'm going to stay in love with cycling. I'm so curious about my potential, and I love discovering what the human body is capable of. And no matter how much it hurts, I do have the power over when it ends. And you can find better talent than mine. You can find stronger women, more experienced women, and certainly much younger women than me. But I know this, no one can outsuffer me. And I wonder, too, how many women and girls before me have left that very lab and decided to quit. Average. I do think about quitting, I admit. And I know it seems impossible, and I know that you get it. I know I have to keep on fighting because the truth is, I can't not fight. Haven't we all imagined quitting? I mean, every one of us in this room at some point, even if it's just in the dark night of the soul, kind of just walking along with the masses like a robot and we just going to eat our tofu in silence. It feels like that might be easier. I don't know. Would it? We are definitely up against a behemoth, right? A giant, the animal agriculture industry with over a century of history. But you are sitting here because there is something in you that says, we will win. I will win. And I kind of wonder if, like me, part of your grit comes from knowing that you cannot bear the taste of quitting on your tongue. So here is what I have learned about what has fueled me over the years. How did I climb back from this 98-pound suicidal anorexic with a nasty cocaine addiction? And then with every expert laughing literally at my odds, how did this crazy vegan athlete break records on a bicycle and earn a silver medal at the Olympics? And now, where do I even find the audacity to fight that behemoth that is Big Dairy, a scrappy little team of 8 at Switch for Good? For them. There are 3 core mindsets that keep me assured of one thing, one single truth: I can't not fight. And the first mindset is probably best reflected in February of 2008. After 8 years of a successful road racing career, much to Kermit's surprise, I'm sure, I'm now 35 years old and invited to go with Team USA to the Beijing Olympic test event on the track. The Beijing Olympic Games were to take place that very same year in August. Team USA took a team of 14 athletes to go race this Olympic test event on the same track where those Olympic Games would take place on, and I was one of those 14. I had earned this invitation because 5 months prior I had won national championships on the track in individual pursuit. And even with this new title and all the titles I had earned as a road racer, Kermit the Frog still saw me as a wannabe with no real honest potential. And I think it's also because he wanted to prove that he was right, and I am average. I'm sure that's why he chose me as the guinea pig who would test the toxic air conditions for my teammates in Beijing. I was the single rider asked to test outdoors. Kermit and a few other sports scientists watched as I cycled to exhaustion in order to measure how my airway would metabolize the air toxicity, which was literally seeing how hard I could go and for how long before the pollution poisoned my lungs and I went into respiratory failure. I was their human lab rat. When I think back, I doubt what they did to me was even legal. Right after that torture ride, we were transported to the Olympic Velodrome for training with my teammates, and about 4 other countries' athletes were there. It's about 5 countries at a time that you're training on the track leading into the event. And from the very first time I ever even considered riding on the velodrome just 7 months prior, I was petrified of it. To this day, when I think about climbing that slope, my heart still constricts. To be honest, I never got over the fear. It never subsided. As some of you know, velodromes are built with Siberian pine wood. They're 250 meters in length with a 44-degree banking at both ends. And if you stand on the outside of the velodrome and look down, it looks like you're standing at the top of a 2-story building peering down to street level. It is so steep. But in track cycling, you're not standing and peering down. You're on a bike with no brakes, on tires 19 millimeters wide, pumped up to 160 PSI, which is basically rock hard. And if you lose your concentration or even your courage for an instant, you're out, you can crash. If you don't maintain a high enough speed, you're gonna slide down that 44-degree banking and crash. And a crash on the velodrome, it most likely will end in broken bones, but it's a guarantee of 3rd-degree burns with Siberian pine sliced into your skin from ankle to ear. I still have Siberian pine all up and down my hip, waiting for it to slough out, but it's been, 15 years. On this particular day, I was already worried about my time because I had just given this max effort as the team guinea pig in Beijing's putrid air. But when I arrived, my fear really amped up based on what I saw. The track was absolutely packed. I was used to individual pursuit at this point, and I had trained with really only a few other riders on the track at the same time. And remember, I have no brakes. Men and women sprinters are flying around the track, and they're diving and climbing, and I'm thinking, I'm supposed to join them? So trying not to think past the moment of fear, I got on my bike. After just a few laps on the apron of the track, I climb up to begin my build-up for the 1,500-meter effort. Male sprinters were diving in front of me 65, 70K an hour. They whipped by so fast, their air was causing my bike to teeter every single time they came by. All I had to do, though, was dive down and complete my effort, which I had done 1,000 times before. That was it, dive down and go. But I was frozen, totally frozen at the top of the track. I was too scared to dive. There was too much traffic. I could hear my coach, Andy, screaming at me, which was so embarrassing. Come down, Dotsie, come down and go. But I was just frozen in fear, completely humiliated as I was exhausting myself with every pedal stroke up at the top. And then finally, it just was pretty much sheer panic and embarrassment that took over. And I just went into survival mode. And with zero ability to consider anybody else but myself, I just dove. German sprinters are screaming at me as I dived down and took the steep plunge. Ostenweg, Ostenweg, Ostenweg. I completed the ugliest, most pathetic 1,500 meter 6-lap effort. It was the slowest 1,500 meter effort I had ever produced. Now, here's probably the time where a motivational speech teaches you to conquer your fears, right? Sorry, though, truly, you can find that on YouTube with Tony Robbins. It's just not my story, because I don't believe you have to conquer your fears to win. From that mortifying day in Beijing all the way to the very last effort my team rode in the 2012 Olympic Games in London, I was viscerally petrified of that track, that steep grade. I really never overcame the fear of freezing or slowing down or feeling that Siberian pine slice into my skin. But you know what? It turns out fear is okay. Fear is even good because it fuels us. And when we think about the slaughterhouses, the caged chickens, the abused dairy cows, we feel so much fear. And we feel helpless, right? We think about the magnitude of who we are trying to save. But we only have one option. We take that fear and we turn it directly into fuel. As a matter of fact, fear is my fuel. When I'm afraid, I find my spirit start going, you know what? Bring it on. Give me a little bit more. Come on. Fear is just simple energy. That's all it is. It's just a feeling. It's just energy. And if we learn to just see it as that, then we can have control over it. So for me, and I suspect for you too, again, there's no quitting. The only way out is just going to be straight on through, diving right down into the middle of that fear and just being in it. It's a fear that, thankfully, it hasn't ever left me, and it's a fear that still fuels me to this day. And I'll tell you what else I've discovered about fear. If we don't learn to embrace the fear that we cannot conquer, we often react by trying to control things, right? All things. This fact brings me to the second mindset, which I first learned during recovery and years of therapy. Now, you've definitely seen a movie or read a book about addiction that didn't at some point, right, quote The Serenity Prayer, about having the wisdom to let go of what you can't control. Well, when you're an addict, you learn that you are desperate for control. For years, I had my body on a really strict regimen. I spent between 4 and 6 hours a day in the gym. When I wasn't on the treadmill or the elliptical machine, I was surviving on a diet of lettuce, onions, coffee, cigarettes, and cocaine. That's it. And this life of anorexia and drugs was measurable, and it was controllable, and I liked control. But today, I'm most empowered by the knowledge of what I can and what I cannot control. Because when we blame factors that are completely out of our control for our failures and lack of progress, we suddenly become totally powerless. And with this victim's mindset, we actually are giving our power to our competitors, right? To politically based advertising, to unfair advantages, to industries that have 10, 15, 100 times our funding. That day in Beijing, after I left the track feeling like that beaten bronco I did, I walked straight to the toilets to relieve myself in every way possible. But when I got inside the latrine, I didn't see a toilet. I saw a pit. That's right, a pit for you to squat over. Yep, not a toilet, just a big hole dug into the ground. And my first thought was, honestly, I really hope that they put actual toilets in before the Olympics, because the first world is not going to want to squat over the hole in the ground. But my second thought was what I refer to as a daymare, which is a nightmare that happens in the day. I imagined this pit of human waste swallowing me whole, like I just got flushed down the vortex of the velodrome, never to be seen again. You see, I would feel too mortified to tell Team USA I was quitting. But if I just magically disappeared into the bowels of the velodrome, then they couldn't think poorly of me. They couldn't look down on me because they just wouldn't know where I had gone, right? And no one would miss me. And I stood up and I walked over to the mirror, and I think about my history of abusing my body, and I think about how many coaches told me that I was too old to even start this sport. And I think about Team USA and our very poor odds going up against the giants of track cycling, like Great Britain and Australia. And then there was Kermit and his clipboard. He pointed out that I don't have the talent to be anything more than average. And today, he chose me as the most dispensable of the 14 Team USA hopefuls. And then I went and proved him right. with a miserable 1,500 meter effort on that track. And I turn around and I look back at the hole dug into the ground for human excretions, and I wonder who in their right mind decides to keep going after a day like today. We do. That's who. We are the people who are not going to ever accept defeat. We remember who we are fighting for, and unlike us, the defenseless animals, they are the true victims, and they need us. And we know we are their voices. We cannot relinquish power to the likes of animal ag and the dairy industry. We cannot walk around sad and defeated. And on that day at the track, I filled my head with all of the reasons I should quit and be flushed into oblivion, never to be seen again. And all of those reasons were things I can't control. My age, my past, the competition, lack of experience, and of course those magic lab results. I have learned that we can control only two things: our effort and our response to that effort. That's all we have. That's what defines us. That is what we must focus on every day. Our effort, and then how we're going to respond to that effort. And so I did walk somewhat proudly out of that shithole. And once again, I decided to do what I do. I decided to control the only thing that I can, my effort. And when we focus on what is controllable, we can see what needs to change. That's the beauty of it. And this realization brings me to that third and final mindset, and that is to understand the difference between tenacity and persistence. Tenacity is not the same as a persistence. Sounds like it. Persistence, though, is doing something again and again and again until it works or doesn't work. There's something in my throat, you guys. But tenacity is actually using new data to make new decisions, to find new pathways, to find new ways to achieve a goal when the old ways just aren't working anymore. I will tell you why I remain focused on tenacity, because it keeps me from being reckless and ineffective. There's a fire within me, the same exact fire that burns in you, and it makes me want to rage, no strategy, no process, to just like unleash my fury. But then I remember we have to keep learning how to get better at winning, as we're winning, because there will come a day when our tenacity puts all of us on the podium. And I learned to be tenacious en route to the 2012 Olympics. Before then, I think I just was mostly this chick who would outwork and outsuffer any athlete that stood between me and my progress. I was persistent, fuel, train, recover, repeat. But then one evening, I was up late, unable to sleep before a really big race in Minnesota, of all places. I flipped on the television to take my mind off the race. I channel surfed until something caught my eye. Pigs. So many pigs. They were standing in a line of filth, being shoved and prodded and beaten and whipped by men who just kept screaming at them. One stuck this long prod up the pig's anus, causing the poor animal to leap forward into this really narrow stall where he was zapped by a stun gun. And then without warning, I see a sharp blade slit the throat of this innocent pig. And then another, and another, and another. The next morning at breakfast, I looked down at the last piece of bacon that would ever lay dead on my plate. I dumped it into the trash. I asked for a double oatmeal, and I hate oatmeal. I'm the only vegan that hates oatmeal in the whole world. And I left to hit that track. When I returned home from that trip, I was on a new mission. I had to know the truth. Truth about all animals and how they end up on our tongues and in our stomachs. And as you know, it doesn't take long to discover the truth if you really want the truth. And that wouldn't let me lie to myself in pursuit of an Olympic medal. How weak would I be if I kept eating animals because I wanted a medal? I knew I had to change my diet, but I wasn't sure how. And I could no longer rely on sheer persistence. That wasn't going to work. I had to be tenacious. I had to learn. I had to adapt what I was eating. I had to morph. I had to change how I fueled myself if I was going to win, if I was even going to make the team. Was I sure it could be done? No. I just remember praying to whoever, please let me stay the same. Please let me just stay the same. I had no idea I was going to get so much better. But I had only discovered one other vegan athlete at the time, a Canadian ultramarathoner, Brendan Brazier, who we all love. And reading about Brendan told me maybe I at least had a fighting chance. But what I was sure of was that I could never again be a part of the capitalization of murder. Medal or no medal, I was done with eating animals. And from them on, from that moment forward, it was tenacity rather than mere persistence that kept me on the team and in the race. The single lesson, too, drives our work at Switch for Good every day. We fight really hard, and we take a step back. We assess, we learn, we adjust, and then we fight again. It's tenacity that forces us to take a very vulnerable look at our status and to continue to get better results with our efforts. So for you and me, for us, for all of us here, we have to keep assessing, tweaking, and fighting again. We can't be bulls in a china shop. We need to remember that it's fear that can fuels us to focus on what we can control and also what we cannot control. And it's tenacity that keeps us responding with what is working and innovative ways, right? Creating innovative ways to stop the killing that spans our globe. And it's been over a decade since I stood on that Olympic podium. Feels like yesterday some days. It's you, though, and people like you who give real meaning to my story. Your work that you do every day, our work at Switch for Good, are so much more critical and important than a medal from some track race. And I didn't want to come here today and leave you with a story about an addict turned Olympian who's soon to be forgotten. I really want to leave you with something that will stay with you. We will still, of course, have days that feel like we are swimming against a tidal wave. And it's on those days that I hope you will remember the message. I hope you will remember what Gandhi said, right? Our competition is no longer laughing, and that is good, right? We're past that. They're no longer ignoring. That was a long time, right? That was like 50 years. They are fighting back because they have seen what we're capable of, and it's exactly where we want them. Big Meat put a commercial on the Super Bowl, which is like a $10 million, ridiculing plant-based meat. And everybody's like, oh no, that's awful. No, it's not. Big Meat is crapping their pants. They're fighting. We want to be here where they're fighting, because what's the next step? All of your faces on monuments. I can see it. So when you feel scared, when you want to remember, I want you to stay in the fear, because you know fear is just dressed up. It's fuel for your fire. And with that fuel, we remain laser focused on what we can control, right? Don't give power to all the circumstances we can't change, because there's so many circumstances that we can't change right now. And then we choose tenacity, responding only to our effort and what we learn from it to change tomorrow's plan of attack. And we know that the alternative is to live forever with the taste of quitting on our tongue. And we know we can't live with that. But as it turns out, you know who can live with that? Yep, Kermit the Frog. Remember when I walked out of that test lab and be damned that diagnosis of average? Well, I later learned that Kermit, too, was once diagnosed as average. It was in that very same lab in Chula Vista, California, about 15, 20 years before, where he gave up. He let the odds determine his fate. His conquests are now in the hands of warriors like us. And so it's not coincidental that when I stepped down from the podium at the Olympics, Kermit was one of the first people to run up and congratulate me. He reached out to hug me, and when he did, he said into my ear, "I don't know who is more proud, you or me." I stepped way back. I was determined to look into those always darting eyes, and I said, me. That's right. There are those who only listen to logic and give strength to their fear, like Kermit, thereby putting their hands, their fate, I should say, in the hands of other people like us, because that's who we are. We are the people who can't not fight.